The tomb of China's first emperor. The year is 210 BCE. China's first emperor is dead. His engineers are sealing the most ambitious burial in human history. An underground palace reportedly threaded with rivers of liquid mercury, ceilings mapped in pearl to mirror the night sky, and mechanical crossbow traps set to fire at anything that moves. The doors close, and they have never opened since. What makes this different from every other ancient tomb is that we know exactly what's inside. We have the receipts. Court historian Sima Qian, writing roughly 100 years after the burial, described the chambers in precise detail: the mechanical rivers, the celestial ceiling, the traps. In 2005, a soil survey conducted by the State Administration of Cultural Heritage measured mercury concentrations inside the mound at more than 100 times the normal background level. The ancient description matched the modern instrument reading almost perfectly. The terracotta army, over 8,000 figures, each with unique facial features, turned out to be just the outer guard. Archaeologists believe they haven't yet reached the palace itself, which sits an estimated 35 meters underground. Ground-penetrating radar in 2015 identified at least 4 distinct sealed chambers beneath the main mound. China's official position is that current technology isn't advanced enough to excavate safely. Many international archaeologists dispute this, but the mound has been quietly restricted to within 500 meters for non-approved personnel. We know what's there. We're simply not allowed to look. The temple vault no court will open. In 2011, a Supreme Court ordered inventory of 6 underground vaults beneath a Hindu temple in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala, revealed something no one was prepared for. Gold thrones, bags of diamonds, ceremonial objects no one could identify. The total value assessed by the court committee reached an estimated $22 billion, the largest treasure discovery in recorded history. 5 vaults were cataloged. Then the team reached Vault B. The door has no hinges, no visible bolts, no conventional opening mechanism. It is engraved with 2 cobras and has reportedly stood sealed since at least the 8th century CE, with one stratum of the substructure possibly extending to the 3rd century BCE. The royal family of Travancore, who managed the temple before Indian independence, maintained that ancient texts prohibit opening it. The Supreme Court of India has upheld this position twice, ruling that Vault B falls outside state jurisdiction. What makes this harder to dismiss is that a 2020 ground-penetrating radar survey identified an additional subterranean chamber directly beneath Vault B, one that wasn't included in the original court order at all. 5 vaults were opened and cataloged, 1 was not. The explanation offered for the distinction has never been legally elaborated beyond deference to divine tradition, and the chamber beneath the sealed vault was found after the ruling. Some researchers ask, if every other vault held catalogable physical assets, what exactly requires a different category of legal protection? The library that still burns every time we touch it. Mount Vesuvius didn't just bury Herculaneum on the 24th of August, 79 CE. It carbonized it. Temperatures reached 300 degrees Celsius in under 4 minutes. A library of at least 800 scrolls, the only intact library to survive from the ancient world, was sealed inside superheated volcanic matter that turned papyrus to charcoal. When Swiss engineer Karl Weber finally reached the Villa of the Papyri through hand-dug tunnels in 1752, the scrolls looked like black logs. Every attempt to unroll one caused it to crumble. The roughly 1,100 scrolls recovered are almost exclusively works of the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus, which tells scholars something important. This was probably not the main collection. The villa's likely owner was Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Julius Caesar's father-in-law, one of the wealthiest men in Rome. His personal library is almost certainly on the lower floor. That floor has never been excavated. Italian authorities have not approved a single excavation permit for the lower level since the 1990s, citing structural risk to the modern city above. But in 2023, University of Kentucky professor Brent Seals led a team that used AI-assisted multispectral imaging to read previously sealed scrolls without unrolling them, winning a $700,000 international prize. The technology argument no longer holds. Some researchers ask, is the hesitation truly structural? Or does the identity of the owner mean the lower library might contain something Rome's historical record preferred to leave buried? The treasure map written on metal. In March of 1952, archaeologists crawling through Cave 3 near Qumran pulled out something that had no business being there. Every other Dead Sea Scroll was written on parchment or papyrus. This one was written on copper. Real metal rolled like a scroll, so oxidized it had to be cut into 23 strips with a circular saw at Manchester University in 1955 just to be read. What it said was stranger than anything else found in those caves. It was a treasure map. Designated 3. Q15 by scholars, the Copper Scroll lists 64 specific locations, measured in cubits, where vast quantities of gold, silver, and additional scrolls are buried. The total inventory, taken literally, describes roughly 65 tons of precious metal. The scroll is written in a colloquial Hebrew dialect distinct from every other Qumran text, suggesting a different author entirely, possibly a temple administrative scribe. Location. 32 specifically describes a buried chest of scrolls near an acacia tree, implying that documents were considered as valuable as bullion. British scholar John Marco Allegro published the first full translation in 1960 and pushed for excavation of the listed sites. The editorial committee, led by Father Roland Deveau, publicly dismissed his interpretation and blocked the permits. In 2006, archaeologist Jim Barfield presented a detailed positional analysis to Israeli authorities and was denied. You do not engrave a fiction on copper. The material cost alone rules out casual composition. So what exactly was worth that kind of permanence? The document that could have saved 54 men. On the 13th of October, 1307, the King of France ordered the simultaneous arrest of every Knight Templar in the country. Over the following 7 years, dozens were burned at the stake, their order dissolved, their Grand Master Jacques de Molay executed publicly in Paris. The official record was unambiguous. The Pope had condemned them. For 700 years, that was history. Then in 2001, Vatican archivist Dr. Barbara Frail reached into the wrong folder and found a document dated August 17th through 20th, 1308, the Chinon parchment, in which Pope Clement V interrogated the Templar leadership at Chinon Castle and formally absolved them of heresy. The document bears the seals of 3 cardinals, Béranger Frédol, Etienne de Suisy, and Landolfo Brancacci. It had been catalogued in the Vatican's own inventory as early as 1628, physically present and logged, but entered under an incorrect reference code that placed it outside the standard Templar trial documentation series. Jacques de Molay burned in 1314, 6 years after the absolution was signed. Frail published her findings in the Journal of Medieval History in 2004. In 2007, the Vatican released a facsimile edition in a limited run of 799 copies at €5,900 each. Mainstream historians accept the misfiling as bureaucratic error. But some researchers ask a harder question. who, in 1628, decided that the document absolving the most politically explosive prisoners in European history belonged in the diplomatic file. The university that burned for 3 months. In 1193, a Turkic military commander named Bakhtiar Khilji arrived at Nalanda University in Bihar with his cavalry. What he found was the largest center of learning in the ancient world. Chinese scholar Xuanzang had visited in 630 CE and described the library, the Dharmaganja, as 3 separate buildings, one of them 9 stories tall. Khilji's forces set it alight. Persian historian Minhaji Siraj, writing in the Tabaqat-i-Nasiri, recorded that the library burned for 3 months. 3 months. The quantity of organic material required to sustain that fire far exceeds what has ever been accounted for in the recovered partial catalog of Nalanda's holdings. But the texts historians mourn were the open collection. Xuanzang's own account and Tibetan chronicles from the 8th century CE reference a restricted inner archive, texts accessible only to the abbot, described as materials that cannot be known without initiation, stored separately from the common collection. A 2015 ground-penetrating radar survey by the Archaeological Survey of India identified a subfloor void in the southern monastery complex below the 7th century construction phase. No excavation permit for that area has been issued. UNESCO World Heritage designation in 2016 added another layer of international review to any future proposal. Fewer than 2% of Nalanda's estimated total grounds have been systematically excavated. Some researchers ask, if the inner archive was sealed below ground level before Khilji arrived, did the fire that erased the library actually miss the most important part of it? The encyclopedia that vanished into its own palace. In 1408, the Yongle Emperor of China completed the most ambitious intellectual project in human history. Over 5 years, 2,169 scholars had been dispatched across the empire to collect every book, every scroll, every manuscript in the Chinese literary tradition and compile them into one work. The result was the Yongle Dadian, 22,877 volumes covering medicine, astronomy, military strategy, agriculture, law, and metaphysics. It was roughly 6 times larger than the Encyclopedia Britannica by character count. The emperor then sealed the original and commissioned a single handwritten copy. A fire in 1557 may have damaged that copy. Today, scholars worldwide have confirmed fewer than 400 volumes. The original, the first complete set, was last definitively located inside the Forbidden City in the early 15th century. No fire large enough to destroy it has ever been documented. No record of deliberate destruction exists. The most widely cited hypothesis, advanced by Chinese historian Shang Chuan in the 1980s, is that the original was entombed with the Yongle Emperor in the Changling Mausoleum, or transferred to a sealed vault beneath the Forbidden City's Wenyuange Pavilion. In 2003, Chinese archaeologists applied for ground-penetrating radar surveys beneath that pavilion. The application was reviewed by the State Council and returned without approval. In 2022, China officially launched a global search initiative for surviving volumes, confirming for the first time that the original's location is unknown. The search scope notably excluded the Forbidden City itself. The man who burned what he couldn't read then wrote the dictionary. On the 12th of July, 1562, a Spanish bishop named Diego de Landa gathered every Maya book he could find in the town square of Mani, Yucatan, and set them on fire. He later wrote that they contained nothing but superstition and lies of the devil. He could not read a single page of what he destroyed. The Maya had been writing for over 1,000 years. Only 4 codices survived. The Dresden Codex contains an astronomically precise Venus table tracking the planet's 584-day synodic cycle, accurate to within 2 hours over a 104-year span, a precision requiring centuries of recorded observational data that no longer exists. The Madrid Codex, the longest surviving Maya document at 112 pages, represents scholars' best estimate of less than 1% of what existed before Mani. Delanda's own account describes over 5,000 confiscated objects and 27 hieroglyphic manuscripts seized from a single noble's home, suggesting the books were not rare elite objects but common enough to be in private residences. Then comes the part that should stop you cold. Soviet linguist Yuri Kinorazov published his decipherment of Maya script in 1952, building directly on phonetic records Delanda had written as a defense to the Spanish Inquisition, which had actually charged him with conducting an unauthorized inquisition. The man who burned the archive also created the only key ever used to read it. A 2018 LiDAR survey of the Guatemalan lowlands revealed over 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures. The administrative records of that civilization are gone. We are reading the ruins through the notes of the man who lit the match, the survey that lost its permit. In 1998, a team from Florida State University arrived at the Giza Plateau with seismic reflection equipment, the same technology used to map oil fields, and pointed it at the Sphinx. What they identified beneath the left paw and along the southern causeway were anomalous cavities, regularly shaped subsurface voids that didn't match the geological baseline of the surrounding plateau. The team submitted their findings to the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. Their excavation permit was revoked within weeks. The raw data was never released publicly. This was not the only such finding. In 1991, Boston University geologist Dr. Robert Shaw and seismologist Dr. Thomas Dobecki had already published seismic survey results identifying cavities along the Sphinx's northern and southern flanks, consistent with chambers approximately 9 by 12 meters in dimension. Their findings were presented at the 1992 Geological Society of America annual meeting. Shaw's separate argument that the Sphinx's erosion patterns indicate a construction date consistent with heavy rainfall that ended in Egypt around 7000 BCE has never been formally refuted by Egyptian authorities, only dismissed. In 2000, Secretary General of the Supreme Council, Dr. Zahi Hawass, stated publicly that there was no scientific evidence of any chamber beneath the Sphinx without directly addressing the published seismic data. Since 2011, no foreign-led seismic survey of the Sphinx has been granted a permit. Some researchers ask the simplest possible question: if the chambers are natural voids with nothing inside, why not open them, confirm they are empty, and end the debate permanently? The 100,000 documents that entered a warehouse and never left. In 1915, as the Ottoman government began the systematic deportation of the Armenian population of Anatolia, something specific was happening in the churches, monasteries, and schools. The archives were being collected, not burned on site. Collected, cataloged, loaded, and transported to Istanbul. A 1919 Allied Commission of Inquiry, operating under the post-war occupation of Constantinople, with findings held today at the UK National Archives under reference FO 608, documented the seizure of Armenian ecclesiastical archives from dioceses including Erzurum, Van, Bitlis, and Harput, estimating their contents at over 100,000 manuscripts. Pre-war library inventories from the Patriarchate of Constantinople and the Armenian Apostolic Diocese of Sis describe 5th century biblical manuscripts, 12th century illuminated psalters, and millet administrative records dating to the 15th century. The Matenadaran Institute in Yerevan which holds the world's largest collection of Armenian manuscripts at roughly 23,000 items, has published research identifying 94 specific collections by name, location, and approximate content known to exist before 1915, for which no post-1920 trace has ever been found. Turkey's official position is that no such archive exists in state holdings. No document from the seized collection has ever surfaced in any public institution. Wartime chaos doesn't produce a specific warehouse destination. You don't carefully transport 100,000 manuscripts through a war zone if you intend to lose them. The act of transport itself is the act of someone who considered the archive worth keeping. Some researchers ask whether what was seized wasn't primarily religious, but legal. Property records, title deeds, documentation of land ownership in territory that was redistributed after the deportations, 10 archives, tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge between them, a Chinese emperor's confirmed tomb, a temple vault a court refuses to open, a Roman library 2 meters below a building no one will excavate, a treasure map engraved on metal that every excavation attempt has been blocked from following, a papal absolution that spent 700 years in the wrong folder, a university's sealed inner chamber that may have survived the fire that supposedly destroyed it, an encyclopedia that vanished inside the most guarded building on Earth, a civilization's entire literary tradition burned by the man who then wrote its only dictionary, a seismic survey whose permit was revoked before the drill touched the ground, and 100,000 manuscripts that entered a warehouse in 1915 and ceased to exist. The mainstream explanation for most of this is loss, bureaucracy, conservation, and the ordinary weight of time. That view deserves respect. Archives are fragile. Institutions protect themselves. History loses things. But the pattern here isn't loss, it's proximity. In almost every case, the sealing happened at the exact moment when someone outside the inner circle was about to read what was inside. That pattern is worth sitting with. If you see it too, subscribe and tell us in the comments. Which one of these do you think we're closest to finally opening? Every civilization leaves 2 records, the one it chose to share and the one it chose to seal. The libraries we've lost may tell us more about who we were than everything we managed to save. The archive is still out there. Subscribe and keep asking who holds the key.